Hello everybody, my name's Bill. This is SixRounds Studio. Today we're back working on the Stephen's favorite. In this video I'm going to show you how I strip the finish off this old walnut stock. Alright everybody, welcome back. The last few videos we've been talking about those Telecaster guitars that I've been building. Still working on those, still more videos coming out on that, but today I want to get onto this Stephen's favorite. I want to get this buttstock stripped. I need to get it stripped so that I can fix or begin to refinish this metal, this receiver. So if you watched the previous video where I talked about why I'm willing to do this level of restoration, then you would understand that I'm not stripping any original finishes at all. This had been redone sometime in the firearms past. I'll put a link to that video up here if you're interested in understanding more about my motivations for doing this. What I'm doing today, I need to strip this finish. It was some kind of a more modern poly finish. They didn't use poly finishes back when this gun was made. They used more of an oil finish, and that's what I'm going to put back on this thing. I have to strip this. It's been my experience that unless the amount of finish is overwhelmingly thick, that I don't like to use strippers. Now, if you watched any of the videos on the restoration of the Ithaca shotgun, there were layers upon layers of added finishes to those stocks, and I had to get those thick layers off before I could even get down into the original finish to strip it. Anyway, it's been my experience over all the years I've been doing this that simply using a 100 grit sandpaper, in this case I'm using a 100 grit cloth back sandpaper because it's more flexible, going to hold up better to what I'm going to put it through. Anyway, it's been my experience that just using this 100 grit sandpaper is going to be all I need to get this finish off. Now, clearly, I don't want to get too far below the finish, and I can see just by looking at the quality of the figure that I'm seeing through this finish that this it did not absorb deeply into the fibers below or into the grain. Matter of fact, I can see lots of unfilled grain. That again, it's an indication to me that I'm not going to have to go too deep in my sanding to get this stripped down to the original wood. Let's go ahead and get started on that. Again, I'm using the 100 grit cloth back, and I'm using my sanding block. I've talked about this sanding block in multiple episodes over the years. Let's see if we can't get some of this finish stripped, and then we'll see exactly what I'm facing as I begin to work down through that finish to the original wood. So just as I expected or suspected that finish is only a couple mil thick or 1 or 2 mils thick, and I'm already getting right back down into the wood, which is good. It just proves my history, proves my experience that this 100 grit sandpaper is absolutely the way to pull those top layers of finish off. Now you may notice that I've left the metal in place, and there's a very specific reason for that. First off, I am going to have to pull that metal in just a little bit because whoever sanded this last over-sanded the wood or sanded it below the metal. But that's the reason I do this, because even if I do restorations on a firearm that hasn't been previously stripped, that metal is a barrier or a limit below which I'm not going to sand. Because if you sand it without the metal, then the odds are pretty high that you're going to end up dubbing off those sharp edges where the outside contour meets the inletting itself. So phase one of this is literally just pulling that finish off. There's a lot more that we're going to have to do to this stock. For instance, we're going to have to pull out some of the dents. We may have to do a little bit of reshaping because whoever did this beforehand changed a little bit of the contours on this. I'm not going to have to do much in that regard, but we will have to do a little bit of that. So phase one of this, quite literally, is just getting the finish off so that we can get down to that wood below. Then we're going to have to go in with the distilled water and the iron and start steaming out some of those minor dents that are here. All right, so what we're going to do is going to be the same. I'm going to just continue to strip these top layers off. I'm going to go off camera for a while, and then I'll bring you back when we get into more of those crucial areas around that receiver. So I've gotten to the bottom of this toe area, or bottom of the stock, and now I'm into the area where it intersects the receiver, or where the receiver is inletted into the wood. So I've switched over to my flexible sanding stick. I've talked about this in previous videos as well, and the objective here is to get as close to that metal as I can. And if I touch the metal, I'm not going to get too excited about that as well. Again, the idea is that I'm going to have to polish the metal anyway. And I'm only using 100 grit, which is probably where I'm going to start when I start doing the polishing on the metal as well. All right, that went pretty easy. Let's flip it over. This is where that metal is proud or higher than the wood. I am going to strip this as close as I can get to it, and then I'm going to have to roll that metal over a little bit. I have this 3/4 inch plastic PVC pipe, and the same thing, I'm going to wrap the paper around it because I need to get into this radius in here. So there is slight fluting in this area, and this plastic helps me, or plastic piping helps me get inside that fluting. Now remember, everybody, what I'm doing is stripping the stock. I am not trying to do any repairs to the contours at this point, or fixing it, or preparing it for additional sanding or finishing. Right now I'm just trying to get this finish stripped off, and what I'm doing by stripping the finish is it helps me see what's underlying and gives me a better sense of what it is I'm facing when I get into final finishing on this, final sanding and final finishing. Back to the flexible stick so I can get over the top of this comb. If you've been around the channel for a while, then you know that I worked for Ruger Firearms for decades, and I actually ran their wood shop for years, so I'm very familiar with how factories manufacture gun stocks. Now, understanding that today we use, considerably more modern techniques than they used back in the early 1900s. But the processes don't change, the philosophy, the thinking doesn't change. For instance, they don't use, or didn't use, CNC machines back in the day. They used some fairly simple turning lathes in order to do this, and then everything was hand finished by people. So people were in there using maybe some kind of a balloon sander or something like that. And then a lot of this was just finished by hand. So when it went to the sanding department back in the day, and even during my days at Ruger, it went at a particular level of finish, and then it was up to the sanding department to refine those the appearance of these gun stocks. So these are people. These are people using hand machines, simple hand machines. So there's no guarantee that everything on a gun stock is symmetrical. If you've got any kind of an older firearm that had a walnut or a wood stock on it, and if you look at it and if you tried to measure that for symmetry so that every side was exactly the same, every contour was matched, you're never going to find that. So going into this with the idea that everything was perfectly symmetrical would be sort of a false philosophy or false idea that if it's not perfectly symmetrical at some point that the restorer or somebody who's worked on this had somehow destroyed some beautiful highly crafted product or process. And in fact, when they were building these things in the early 1900s, these people were talented, they were experienced, but they weren't by definition craftspeople who were looking to create as much art and perfection as they can. That said, to this day, when I see an old Winchester or any gun that was manufactured in the late 1800s up through the mid 1900s, I'm always amazed at what they could accomplish with what I know were simple machines. So back to this, I'm going to look at this, I'm looking at this, and I'm thinking, you know, is there anything that I can do to sort of improve the symmetry just a little bit? I'm looking here, and I'm seeing that this has a little bit of a belly, this has a little bit of an indent, so I can go in here with a fine rasp and I can sort of make this visually a little bit better, and I probably will, but that won't be today's video. Alright, we've got this all stripped. The last thing I've got to do is to sand these bevels here. But in order to do that, I am going to have to pull the receiver out of the stock. So let's do that. That looks like it might be missing one of its ears, but I don't know that for a fact. It looks broken, and it is broken. I can see it. There's a little ear that goes in there, and that little ear is what keeps this compressed, just like on a Winchester. So I'm going to have to repair that. If you want to see how I'm going to do it, you can go look at another video that I did on restoring an old Winchester gun stock where the ear was broken on that one. I'll put a link to that video up there as well. This is turning into a little bit bigger project than I thought it was going to, but that is what restoration is. You look for the problems and then you try to repair those problems as they show up. This is going to end up being a little more interesting video than I thought. Alright, while we're here, let's see if we can't get this bevel stripped. Alright, we're stripped. That's today's video. It has revealed all kinds of interesting things, which I knew it would. So I have some dents I have to steam out. I have some dings that I have to steam out. I can now see that this ear is broken off this gun stock, and what is happening, and I'll show you a close-up here, is it's allowing the receiver to split away from the metal. And it's because that ear is not there to hold it in place. So we're going to have to replace that. I'll do a video on just repairing that if you guys want, and show how that has to be modified or repaired so that that gun stock stays tight up against the metal or the receiver. That's what restoration's all about, guys. You know, you go in and you do a discovery, you do a survey. Sometimes the survey isn't something you can immediately see. You see it as you begin to do the work on the gun itself. All right, guys, if you enjoyed this, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'm just a few days away from 6,000 subs, and I would love it if you would help me get there. I'm still working on the Telecasters. We'll be back on those in a future episode as well. I'm not sure where I'm going on this next. I don't know if I'm going to work on the receiver and get that receiver shaped to the wood that I have, or if I'm going to try and do that repair. I really don't know. I can see the break now, so we may do that repair first. So if you're interested in that, you can go see that video that I just pointed out, see how I'm going to approach that, and then perhaps I'll do the same thing over here. All right, guys, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're part of the channel. I appreciate you all being here. I will see you in the next video. See, there's a gap, or an expanding gap right in this area right here. If I push it in, you can see it closes. Here, no ear. If you look down inside, you can see that it's broken. You can see the broken fibers. So that's what's keeping the bottom of the metal in this area right here from squeezing up tight to the receiver. And that ear will fit inside this open square up against this shoulder. And that'll keep this from spreading out and keep a nice tight fit of the wood to the metal. Fun stuff, guys.